The S5 IIX is a beast of a camera, and it brought a lot of necessary and important changes to the Lumix lineup. In my previous video, we talked about the cons of this camera, and while it is an amazing camera, there are some cons that you need to be aware of when you're buying this camera. So if you haven't gone and watched that video, I will link it up here and you can go and watch that video. Now, the S5 IIX is a beast of a camera, and I know I ragged on it a little bit in the last video. There are problems with the camera that I have personally using this camera, and I just wanted to share them with everyone in case there were people that do the same thing as I do and were just looking into the camera to know the positives and negatives. So in this video, we're going to talk about the positives of this camera because it is a beast. Especially when you compare it to other cameras in the price point, there really is no other camera that compares to what it offers. I absolutely love this camera, and there's a reason why it's in my kit. And I wanted to talk about those reasons in this video because for me, every camera is a tool. I use every camera differently, and I use this camera very differently from the way I use my GH6s or my Pocket 4Ks. So I just want to break down why this is actually in my kit, because I think it's important to talk about, even though there are negative parts of the camera, why I still chose to buy this camera. So without further ado, let's get into the pros. How's it going, YouTube? My name is Jeremy, and I am the owner and founder of Levison Productions, which is a production company based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I started this channel because I felt like YouTube was lacking a positive educational side, and I wanted to bring that back to YouTube and teach what I've learned over the past 3 years of running a full-time creative business. So let's get into this video. The main thing that I love about this camera is just how amazing it is as a photography camera. Before this, I was using the GH6, and it just lacks a lot when it comes to photography. The addition of the S5 IIX to my kit has really upped my photography game a ton and allowed me to get better looking results than I could with the GH6. I haven't even really dove deep into the photography modes very much, but I can tell you that the autofocus is snappy and it locks on once you've kind of learned how to work with it. The photos are clear and sharp, which is nice. Skin tones and colors are generally perfect out of the gate, and it's just a very easy camera to use for photography. It solved all my needs and been a huge upgrade for my kit, especially in low light situations. The second thing that I love about this camera is the dynamic range. Now, it claims about 14 stops of dynamic range, but CineD did a test and it's at about a 12.3 stops. That actually is pretty comparable to those in the same price point. The A7 IV has a little bit more, but the R6 and R6 Mark II are less, and so is the XH2S. I usually overexpose about 1 to 2 stops or somewhere in that range, and it really allows me to pull back the image while retaining the highlights and have very little noise in the shadows. And I just love that you can do a lot of push and pull with this camera, and the dynamic range is a vast improvement over the GH6. Now, sort of stemming from that last point, but I've always loved Vlog. Vlog is one of my favorite profiles to color grade, as it's got a kind of commercial edge, but also can be pulled back to be more like a film look. Plus, when you use like a plugin like Dehancer or Look Designer, you can really get a beautiful film look without doing much to it. Vlog is beautiful, and it has a lot of room to allow you to manipulate the image how you want. And the only color science I prefer over Vlog is B-RAW or even just the new red Komodo. Now, dual native ISO is a game changer for anyone who shoots in low light conditions. The dual native ISO on the S5 IIX isn't nearly as good as the Sony FX3 or A7S III, but it still allows me to film in conference rooms or event spaces or, lower light areas while also not having a ton of noise in the image. I've definitely used this 4000 ISO a lot since owning this camera, and I've been incredibly impressed with how little noise there is at 4000 ISO. And even at 6400 ISO, this camera really isn't terrible if you can let enough light in. So for most low light situations, you're not really going to have a hard time, and I think that's a lot to do with the full frame sensor. It just allows you to bring in a little bit more light and be less noisy. Now, Lumix has always been a leader when it comes to IBIS, and the S5 IIX is no different. The IBIS in this camera was revamped from anything we'd ever seen before in Lumix cameras, and now with the new 2.0 firmware update, it's gotten even crazier. I think everybody's favorite feature was the addition of the phase detect autofocus system. This was long overdue, and quite frankly, too many people switched away from Lumix because of this. But this is one of my favorite features, even though I griped about it in the last video, because before this, I never had phase detect. So for me, it's been awesome to have a new tool at my disposal, and it's allowed me to get some shots that I wouldn't normally have been able to get, or that I would have had a hard time doing. And it's also been a really great camera for doing social media content or YouTube videos, and it's been a really great feature just to have for the few times, or the times that you actually need autofocus. Now, the final feature that I want to talk about that I love is open gate. I left this for last because everybody seems to put autofocus in open gate first, but I wanted to talk about it last. I do a lot of work with clients who want both vertical and horizontal content. Open gate allows me to appease that and also not give up my creative freedom. I don't have to shoot in vertical when they want vertical, or shoot in horizontal when they want horizontal. I can shoot in open gate and use a frame marker to make sure that I'm getting a good vertical shot and a good horizontal shot. And this is a feature that's starting to be added to other cameras, but it's also a feature that I think is a game changer for what the video world has become today. Along with OpenGate, I also love that it can shoot ProRes 422, B-RAW externally, ProRes RAW externally, and all-I. So it's got a lot of great codecs, and it makes it very easy to use, especially since I think the only 8-bit codecs are in the MP4 format, so it's basically a fully 10-bit camera. So obviously in my cons video, I said this is a mediocre video camera, and I think that I may have misspoke. It is a good video camera. I think that there were compromises made that make it a little bit harder for me to use for my production work, but I didn't really buy this as a production camera. I bought this as a photography camera that could do video on the side. It's not the perfect hybrid camera, but it does come very close to that. It's been a huge improvement in my kit for autofocus needs when I am, tracking a subject, or I'm trying to do something that's just a little bit harder on manual focus. It does add some positives over a GH6, like depth of field, dynamic range, and low light. The main reason I bought this camera was because I needed a photography camera, and this camera is absolutely phenomenal when it comes to photography. I have had zero gripes about this camera. I've learned more and more the more I use it. So I know I ragged on this camera a bit in my negatives video, but I honestly felt that those negatives were what hinders my ability in mainly the video space. But I still love this camera, and I will continually use it, but I think it is a phenomenal camera, and if you're on the fence about buying it, just buy it. I can't speak highly enough of this camera despite my frustrations with it. I think that for most people, this is going to be a huge upgrade over any other Lumix camera that you might have. At the price point that it's at, it offers so much more value for your money than any other camera. So thank you for watching. I hope this video was helpful. If you found it helpful, please like it. And if you do want to see my negatives video, it's linked in the description and earlier in this video, but it's also on my main channel. So I hope you guys all have a great day and that you stay safe.